But that's a good one. Okay, great. Thanks very much for inviting me here this morning. We're going to talk a little bit about virtual economics. And virtual economics is really what I do. I spend a lot of time running around the world working with companies who are seeking to make as much money as they possibly can selling online. And it turns out that the rules for making money selling digital goods and digital services through the internet are just different to selling goods that are physical and being sold through a shop. So I want to share with you some of the things that we have learned and some really specific tips on how people are able to make the most out of their programs. So let's not worry too much about the agenda. Let me tell you what I mean by virtual economics. We went ahead and went into a dictionary to try and work out what it really means. So I call it the science that deals with the production, distribution, and consumption of temporarily simulated or computer-extended goods or services. That's a really big sentence. Let's try and put it into English. It's basically a scientific method for maximizing the revenues on the online marketing, sales, and distribution of digital goods and services. We're talking about the rules that make it possible for you to make as much money as possible selling virtual goods. Now, why are the rules different? Well, it's really simple, right? And this is why we ended up in economics. If you think about the way that a regular business works, right? You've got two kinds of costs. You've got fixed costs, you've got variable costs. Fixed costs, you're going to pay whatever happens. Variable costs change when you sell something, right? If you sell bicycles, if suddenly everybody wants your bicycles, you've got to buy more metal to build the frame, more rubber to build the tires. But in digital goods, that's pretty much what your digital factory workers are doing. You're all fixed cost. Nobody is actually building a new copy of Farmville when a new person signs up for the watermelon farm that Charlie mentioned. Similarly, if you're selling physical goods, once they're built, they've got to go somewhere. You've got a cost and inventory. But if you're selling digital goods, there is no inventory. Okay, so your digital inventory has no relationship to sales volumes. So what that really means is that classic economics kind of slips over into a completely different world because you don't have to factor variable goods. And what that means is the measurements that you use to track the success of your e-commerce program are going to be substantially different. Put it into concrete terms, if I'm selling bicycles, I want to know how many units I sold. Right? It's a really important metric because every time I sell a unit, I've got to go out and replace all of the physical goods to build the next unit. But in digital goods, when I sell a unit, it has no impact on my inventory. Therefore, how many units I sold is not really that important. And so now we have to start thinking about what are the metrics that matter to help us build the most effective program possible. There's one thing people are always saying, it's a whole new world, right? The world has changed, we're all buying things that are virtual, Zynga is doing whatever it's doing, Facebook has every third person in the world using it. The reality, though, is that to make those things work, the revolution is being worked out with a slide rule. Is anybody else as old as me and remembers the slide rule? Everybody just has calculators. Sheesh. Right? It's all about the numbers. Zynga only works because of the math. The important thing to remember, though, is that people are always saying the world is changing or the world has changed. It's not true. What's true is that the world changes. Whatever you're doing today, however successful it is, if you keep doing it for the next 3 years, it won't be successful anymore. Right? Think about this. 4 years ago, the most valuable company that you could find in America was MySpace. MySpace did not become a bad idea. It's the same idea it was before, but that's the problem. It's the same idea it was before. Right? So as the world changed, as consumer expectations shifted, they stayed in the same place and they got crushed. Crushed is a relative term. I wouldn't mind being number 95 on Alexa, but the reality is the world is constantly changing. You have to be tracking and measuring and changing with the marketplace if you don't want to be the red line in this graph. right? Evolution is a journey, not a destination. Evolution doesn't stop. And as a business owner, you have to continuously evolve, and you have to do it advisedly, explicitly, and with a sense of the science of what you're doing. Now, a lot of the people in this room right now are affiliates. Can I get a show of hands? How many of you are internet marketers, affiliate marketers? I can't tell if it's that few people or that few people who are willing to put their hands up. Okay, it's the latter. Good. Okay. So as affiliate marketers, you know, right? You spend your whole life in front of a spreadsheet or a calculator. You're doing the math, right? Because you know how much it's costing you to get the traffic. You know how much cash is being sent back to you through that traffic, right? I'm going to take silence as assent. So you're already doing that. But there are lots of different angles. And the most important thing that we have learned over the last 4 or 5 years putting together e-commerce programs for companies around the world is this: measurement is multidimensional. So if you're a traffic generator, you will tend to focus on a measurement. I found that most people focus on close rates. What's my close rate? That's the thing I want to know. How much of my traffic that comes in ends up buying something? It's a great metric. It's a core metric. But it turns out, to really work out how your business is doing, it's only one of 4 core metrics that are going to tell you how much cash is coming into your business. And to understand all 4 of them, we put it together because we're just that sort of a person. We put it together into a model, and we call it the REACT model. And it's called the REACT model because the R, the A, the C, the T represent the names of the measurements that people are using today to work out how they're getting the most out of their e-commerce business. Predictably, the R, A, C, and T aren't in the same order in the model, because that's just life. But our 4 elements are traffic and close rate, right? Things that we're all very comfortable with. Average order value and retention. And if you can get the perfect intersection of those 4, you can deliver the maximum revenue back into a business. And if you're missing any of the 4, then you're missing a trick. Okay, so let's talk about what these really mean, one after the other. Right, so the first thing you want to do, traffic is something that you drive. I'm not going to take a room filled with people who drive traffic and tell you how to drive traffic. You know how to drive traffic, but once you've got the traffic, the question is, how do you make sure that they close? Right, there's part of the process, which is what affiliates do brilliantly, which is find the right person, bring them to the right offer, get them interested. But once they're interested, how do we make sure that they actually buy? Right? This is something that Plymouth spends a lot of our time thinking about is somebody wants to buy. How do I make it so easy that every single person who wants to buy does? Because I'll tell you, you saw in that funny little video earlier, 75% of people who come to a checkout intending to buy something don't. And often the reasons are really basic. There was a wonderful study done by a German university a couple of years ago. It showed that German consumers, when they go to a checkout page, if they don't see a payment method that they're comfortable with, they will abandon at a rate of 79%. Okay? And Germans, generally speaking, aren't big on credit cards, so they're looking for Giropay, Sofortüberweisung, some kind of bank thing. The study continued, if you add just one payment method that they're comfortable with, that abandonment rate goes from 79 to 46. By the way, the delta, the people who are buying, most of them actually end up using credit cards. It's a question of comfort rather than a question of availability. Right? It's not somebody saying, oh, that's how I can pay. They want to feel comfortable in the environment. By the way, adding a second payment method drops the abandon from 46 to 43. The second one doesn't even matter. So if you are driving traffic into a checkout process, you're finding people who are absolutely sure they'd like to buy something, you want to make sure they have the highest likelihood of doing so, there's some really basic things you can do. Right? First, you want to make sure that they are seeing their own language, their own currency, and payment methods they're comfortable with. Okay? I can't do the normal thing I do. In the States, I always say to people in America, if you went to buy something and the checkout page was in French and the price was in euros and they only wanted to take bank transfers, how many of you would buy? And normally the whole room pretty much is this silent. The reality is, if you can't give people something they're comfortable with, they're not going to buy. Easy stuff to fix. But you can do more complex solutions to continue to increase that close rate. Do some user experience tuning. What I mean by user experience tuning, understand how much information someone's comfortable giving you given the product that you're actually selling, right? Or make sure that graphically it works, or change the way in which cross-sells are offered. Multi-channel availability. That's just a big way of saying make sure people can buy through the browser. Make sure they can do it on their smartphone. Make sure they can do it on their, I don't know what's going to come up next, their games console. And ultimately provide things like single-click buying. Right? There's a reason why every one of us who has an iPhone or an iPad or an iPad has actually bought apps. Right? It's easy. You don't think about it. Some examples of ways that people have done this. We've worked for the last couple of years with the good people at Blizzard to do the online payments for their BlizzCon, the big conference at the sort of the beginning of the fall where they all play against one another. The key that we had with these guys was, firstly, you can see that visually, it's a very appealing sort of checkout. It fits into the world that people are coming into. Lots of payment methods. They really pushed us 2 years ago to add about, 7 or 8 different methods. Ultimately, when you look at it, you think to yourself, okay, this is part of the experience that I signed up for. Right? I said I wanted to see BlizzCon, terrific. It looks like I'm in the same place. I can move forward. But there are other things we're doing too. Right? If you look at this layout, this is a layout that actually exists. You can buy straight through a smartphone. Bear in mind, we tend to talk about smartphones as though it's iPhones, and I guess there's some other stuff kicking around. Turns out on Android, you actually can be selling direct on Android. So we popped this stuff together. You'll notice a couple of things different here. There's a lot less fields than the last one I showed you, and than the next one I'm going to show you. And it's designed to meet the user experience expectations of a smartphone user. Right? So a smartphone user, how many of you find it really, really easy to type on the smartphone? Okay, there's one guy. I want lessons. Okay, it's a pain, right? It doesn't matter what you've got, whether it's got physical little chiclet things or you're doing it on the screen. It's a pain to type on the phone. So we move things around. We ask for the credit card first, because that's really the key piece. Once someone's gone through that, they don't mind popping in their name and address. But we've taken out the address as well. So we've made it nice and easy for someone to move forward. So we're understanding the needs of the channel. If I was selling the same thing through the browser, I'd probably take more information. But because it's on a smartphone, I know that the more information I ask for, the less I'm going to get. This is an old a slide, actually, from a company we were fortunate enough to work with on Facebook. Don't worry so much about what's on screen. Now, you'll notice we're able to take more information here. An important piece here was understanding user experience. It turns out that on Facebook, if you bring someone to a checkout page where you have like a drop-down to change what sort of payment method you want to use, it converts okay. If you give them 2 buttons, one for credit card, one for PayPal, even though they go to the same place just with the payment method pre-selected, the conversion goes up in high double figures. I don't know why, I just know that it does. Again, the key here is we're making sure that anybody who wants to buy does buy. And a big part of the reason that they're going to do it is because we've made them comfortable in the space that they're in. And we've understood the dynamics of the user experience expectation. Okay, so now we've gone through this, and we're feeling pretty good, right? We've got our traffic piling in, we've created a really good checkout, people are going to close. And for a lot of people, that's a great place to stop, but it's really a terrible place to stop. Because there are 2 more pieces that are actually going to supercharge the revenues that come through your business. And the first one is average order value. And it's a great little metric. Because what we're talking about is saying, okay, I've now made sure that the maximum proportion of people who want to buy will buy. And now we're saying, and they will spend as much as they are actually willing to spend. When the wallet is open, extract a little more. I know when I go grocery shopping on a Sunday with my kids, this is honestly true. I walk around the supermarket picking out the deals. Right? I'll buy Coke one week and Pepsi the next based on what's on sale. And then you get up to the checkout and you're waiting in line for the checkout and you pull a cold Coke out of the fridge. And I've just spent 20 minutes agonizing over whether I'm paying 27 or 32 cents for a can, and I just pay them $1.79 for that one 16-ounce bottle. Now that maybe says something about me, but every supermarket does that. And the reason is that at a certain point, you've anchored your mind around a certain amount that you're going to spend. I already know I've got $150 worth of stuff on the conveyor belt. Another $1.79 doesn't really matter. The same logic applies when people are buying online. This works every time, ladies and gentlemen, I assure you. If you can give your customer the opportunity to buy something else that costs 50% or less of their core buy, right? So if they've signed up for something for $50, you offer them something for 25 or less, you will see people attach at between 20 to 25%. I don't know why it works, but I can assure you it does. The only caveat I would give you is this concept I've written up there of cognitive load, which is really a big way of saying people can't remember very many things at the same time. The average human brain can remember things in lots of 3, 4, or 5. You ever thought about how you describe your telephone number to somebody? You ever heard someone try to be a smarty pants and do it differently? In the States, the phone numbers are ... A 3, a 3, and a 4. That's really all that the human brain can remember at any given time. So you can offer 2, maybe 3 choices. When you put the 4th one on, you've just overloaded your customer's brain, and they lose touch with the fact that they were going to buy the first one. Again, there's a million studies out there that can explain it. I don't really understand how it works. I'm not a psychologist, but I do know 100% of the time you go over 3 offers and your accept rate goes down. Let me give you an example of how this plays out. This is a great company we work with out of the UK called Slytherin. They sell strategy games. Whenever you go to buy something, they are going to offer you, actually they overdo it, but there we go. They offer you some choices that are very closely aligned. So this particular game, you can't see it up here, but this particular game is a game that has many chapters. So you go to buy one, they're always going to offer you all of them. And the reason they do that is that people buy them. And again, you can count on 20 to 25% of attach rate when you get really, really good, well-selected cross-sales. It works all the time. And if you think about it, you're going to offer something that's half the price of the core item. You're going to get 25% attach rate. Do the math, that's 12.5% increase in your revenues. If you were running on a steady level and you could add 12.5%, that goes straight to the bottom line. And again, we've watched this work 100 times. Finally, let's talk about retention. Right? It's the oldest saw in the book. It costs you twice as much to get a new customer as to resell to the same customer again. Right? That's sort of what everyone accepts. But in the e-commerce world, I'm not sure that we have really internalized that. I think we rush out, we find people, we drive them through the campaign, we get them to pay for something, we cash the check, and we go drink a beer. Retention is huge. Once somebody has started to show an interest in your product or your product set, not only are they easier to bring back to sell, they also, believe it or not, become much less price conscious. I work with a number of companies, again, largely in the games sector in this sense, who came to us a number of years ago and said, look, I'm running everything through my distributors, and I have a $20 title, and by the time they have taken their cut, I end up getting like $4. Not quite sure how, but I do. And they're killing the value of my title because they sell it for $6.95. And so we would say, well, let's sell direct off of your site, because you've now got a brand and people come to your site, and when they come to your site, you're providing them a link back to your distributor who's going to give you $4. That doesn't seem like a good deal. And people would say, well, how much can I charge? If my distributor's charging $6.95 for my $20 title, how much can I charge? I assume only $6.95. Turns out, no. Turns out you can sell it for $20. This is why we had to have a different branch of economics, because logically, using classic economics, that shouldn't work, right? You should be going out and searching for the lowest price, but committed customers don't. Committed customers with whom you have a relationship that has moved from a business to more of an emotional link will pay more. Again, I'm not bright enough to know why, but I assure you it happens. So what does it mean to move from a business to an emotional link? That means you've got to do the mechanics, right? You've got to remember who they are, where they live, what their credit card number is, their preferences. But it also means having some stuff that's a little bit personal. It doesn't have to be wildly personal. Maybe when they log in, they can see all the things they bought in the past. They can re-download. They can get their serial numbers. Maybe you invite them to a special guests-only webinar. It doesn't take a huge investment. But customers who come back will spend a whole lot more. One of the customers we're working with is, again, I apologize, this just happens to be a games industry section, a company called Matrix Games. They're out of Vermont. For those of you who've been following the news, yes, I believe they've now cleaned up all of the floodwater, but they didn't talk to us for a week. What they do is they have built their own customer account management, right? So when you go to their site, you log in at their site, they remember you, they give you special deals. It's very nice. There's an emotional bond. And we linked that together with the checkout process, so that now when one of their customers comes back and wants to buy something, not only do we remember exactly who they are and what their email address is and what their home address is, we also remember the credit card they used last time. This is going back to that iTunes model. For somebody who likes these games, you can, they can simply come back in and complete the process in a couple of clicks without doing any typing. It seems a small thing. But again, I urge you to look at the smartphone in your pocket or in the person next to you's pocket and ask yourself, how much would you have bought if it were hard? And how much have you bought because it's easy? Turns out, building that link, making it easy, making it so that someone can get what they want whenever they want it, has a profound effect. It drives the repeat sales up by something in the range of 20%. A person will have a 20% higher chance of coming back. Now think about what that really means in terms of customer acquisition and in terms of driving revenues, especially when you've put it together with giving them the opportunity to fill their basket with extra little good things. And this is really where we're going, because, as I mentioned before, we have this nice little model. Okay, I'm not going to tell you there aren't other things that you could do, but if you start here, you're in good shape, right? Our revenue is defined by the amount of traffic that comes in, the amount of that traffic that we close, the average order value of the closed traffic, and how many of those people are going to come back. We can actually use this to track the growing effectiveness of our e-commerce program. Right, so if I start here, right, it's a classic little model. It's not intended to be a lot of money, right? 10,000 visits, we close maybe 7%. We get $50 out of each order, and 10% of the customers come back, right? 1.1 means 10% of the customers come back. And the classic model that we'd look at when we're out talking to folks to add traffic is, well, what if I could double your traffic? Right, that's the classic thing, right? You always say, if I could get double the traffic, I get double the money, and fair enough. If we leave those other pieces right where they were, sure enough, you can get double the money. But just imagine what happens if instead you can bump your close rate by a couple of points. You can bump your average order value by 10%, which is actually kind of low. And you can have just 10% more of your customers come back. With that same traffic, you're increasing your income by nearly 50%. And imagine if you can do that and keep it and then go get the other 10,000 visits. When you do that, instead of doubling the revenue that you're getting from what you're building, you're tripling it. So by combining these different ideas, you can really turbocharge the growth of your business. And again, because we're selling digital goods, which don't have variable costs, don't have raw materials, don't have inventory needs, that money's flowing right to the bottom line. So my time's about up. I think that the ideas I'd like you to come away from this talk with are simply these. Change is a constant state and not a one-time event. And that's important because in the technology business, you see companies come and you see companies go, and the ones that stay are the ones who are constantly changing along with the market. There was a wonderful article I read the other day about Facebook, and it argued with the premise that Facebook has won. And the great phrase the guy turned was, it's not that Facebook has won and MySpace has lost. It is rather MySpace won, then Facebook won, and next somebody else will win. Unless Facebook is able to continue to change and be that next winner. So it's a constant state of flux. And successful businesses must continuously evolve. And evolve is not just about change, it's about controlled change. It's about understanding what are the dynamics that are driving your business, which ones you can change, and where you can afford to take a dip in favor of the greater good. And what I mean by that is somebody asked me the last time I presented virtual economics, they said, well, you've talked about putting cross sales onto every checkout. He says, well, I've done that. But it cuts my close rate. And I said, well, that's okay, fair enough. What did it do to your average order value? He said, I don't know. Well, if you think about it, you can afford to lose a couple of tenths of a % on your close rate if your average order value is going up by 20%. So having that sense of the three-dimensional as you put the things together actually can cause you not to go down the wrong path because you're only measuring one thing. The React model, as we put it up here right now, represents a completely usable and used rubric for tracking your business today. Now, of course, my business has to evolve as well, so by this time next year, doubtless the React model will have become, React cubed or some such. But I think that if we can move ourselves forward as an industry over the next year or so to really start to get that multidimensional sense of how all of these pieces come together to drive really high-end revenues, you'll continue to see the internet business outperform all the other segments in industry. So take those three thoughts home with you, and hopefully you can also take home the word written in the sand. That's what I have for you this morning. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand back to Charlie.